This video I'm going to build the Canopia Rubicon 6' by 8' polycarbonate and aluminum shed designed by Palram. If you would like to see how I built the shed floor, I've provided a link above to watch the video on how I did that. The first thing that I'll do is overlap and screw down the 3 plastic floor pieces, which I end up having to adjust later on, so I would only do the outsides if I had to do this again. And I would recommend weighing the floor pieces down if it's windy out so they don't get blown away while you're working. I'm using a 1/2-inch galvanized screw that I had to buy to fasten these to the floor platform I built. And for each overlap of the plastic floor, I'm screwing 2 on the ends and another 3 in the middle starting from the back to the front. Now I'll place the metal piece with tabs on the ends over the front of the plastic floor that has the 2 grooves sticking out in the middle, and I want to make sure the slots on the ends of the metal piece are on the outside. Next thing I'll do is lay out most of the hardware so I can start putting the 4 corner posts together. So I start that by taking the 4 metal pieces that are flat on the 90-degree outside and put a couple of the square head bolts down the inside channel. Then I'll put the black plastic 90-degree piece in those bolts with the wide side on top and finger tighten the nuts on. So taking a closer look at the next one, again I insert the 2 bolts in the channel, insert the bolts into the middle holes on the black plastic piece, and then finger tighten 2 nuts on the bolts. And then I just do the same thing for the last 2 corner posts. Next I'll bolt on the bottom W-shaped metal brackets along with the bulky round gray pieces. So this one I slide a larger square bolt into the channel, put the round gray spacer piece on, then the bracket and a nut. And again, I'm only hand tightening these to keep the parts together during the installation. Then I go through and do the same for the last 2 corner posts. Now I'll take the 4 side posts and attach the same hardware I just attached to the bottom of the corner posts, and again I only hand tighten the nuts enough to hold the parts on during installation. Next I'll lay the metal trusses down the back of the shed floor, and then move the side posts down on the edges next to them to make it easier to assemble. Here I will take 2 longer square head bolts and put them through the truss with the square on the outside, then I'll barely put nuts on both the bolts. Now I will slide both the square heads down the channel of the side post, and I'll want to get a 7 and 29/32 of an inch measurement from the bottom of the truss to the top of the post. And once I have that measurement, I can tighten up both of the nuts so I can move on to the next one. So I'm doing the same thing here. I put the bolts in with the square head on the outside, slide the heads down the channel of the post, measure just over 7 and 7/8 of an inch, and then tighten the nuts. And after both of those are done, I'll go over to the other side and do the same thing for both of the trusses and side posts. Next I will assemble the shed doors, so I will lay out the panels for them and gather up all the hardware I'll need. There are 3 of these side pieces shaped like a capital A and 1 piece that's shaped like a lowercase h, which will go on the opening side of the left door. So I will lay the side pieces out and then grab the 4 shorter top and bottom pieces for the door that are also shaped like a capital A, but they have a round channel to screw into. Next I will grab this packet of hardware that contains some silver self-tapping screws that I will use to assemble the door frame. So I will slide the panels into the side pieces and then insert the bottom and top pieces into both of the sides and line up the holes to screw everything together. And taking a closer look, I will slide the bottom up into the side pieces and then line up the holes and put a self-tapping screw in each side. Then I will do the same for the rest of the door joints, which will complete the assembly of the frames. Next I will screw the door hinges on, so I will line the hinges up with the 2 staggered pre-drilled holes on the door frame sides. So looking closer at the last hinge, I just line the holes up and then put 2 screws and making sure not to tighten them too much so I don't strip out the aluminum, which is a softer metal. Now I will install the door latch, so I'll begin that by lining the smaller part with 4 holes on the left door side with the stop, and the larger part of the hinge will go on the opposite frame side with 2 holes. Then I will just screw both parts to the door frames again, making sure I don't use too much torque and strip the holes out. Now I will screw the door locks to the top and bottom of the left frame with the door stop. This will prevent the wind from blowing the door around and make it a little harder to force the doors open. So I will just line the 3 holes up with the pre-drilled holes in the frame, put in 3 screws, and then flip the lock open so the bar doesn't get in the way during the installation. Next I'm going to take this middle post and lay it out on the floor along with 2 corner posts to start assembling the back wall. And I'm going to install the W-shaped bracket on the end the same way I did at the bottom of the corner posts. Then I'll take this longer H-shaped piece and put the side with the hole in the middle up and near the middle post. And here I slide the wrong bolt into the channel, which I will swap out later on in the video. I needed a longer square head bolt here for the braces. Now it's time to slide the panels into the middle post, and it's important to make sure the stickers are on the outside since that is the only side with UV protection. So I will work my way around the frame inserting the panel and so I can screw everything together. And I will use these black screws with the larger round head to insert the first screw on the outside hole for each side. I'm only inserting one screw for now to make it easier to insert the panels into the corner posts since it's such a tight fit. This will hold the top and sides together as I work my way down, and then I can insert the other screws once I have the panels in all the way. Now I can make sure the middle post is all the way inserted into the top piece, and then tighten the bolt up so they will stay together. Next I will insert the side panel into the corner post, and then screw this top metal piece on to start the sides. So I will just slide the top piece over the panel, and then line up the holes and insert 2 screws to hold it in place. Then do the same for the other side, and here's a closer look at how these go together. The top piece slides down over the panel and inside the black corner bracket. Then I just insert 2 screws into the pre-drilled holes. Now I will insert a couple square head bolts into the side post channels and hand tighten a nut on just above the trusses I attached earlier. Here I will make this look easier than it really was. I ended up having to wait until it wasn't windy out to do this next part by myself. This wall kept blowing over on me when I first tried it, so that is why I put this ladder behind the back wall and weighted it down. So after getting the wall up and putting the first middle truss assembly into place, I will slide the nut and bolt I just inserted up all the way on both sides and tighten the nuts up. Then I will go around the base of the walls and adjust the bottom brackets and tighten those up as well to help hold the back and sides into place. Next I will insert some square head bolts into the connector pieces from the bottom, so the nuts will be on top, which I will barely put on so these can slide into the channels on the top side pieces. And I will do that now by lining the bolt heads up with the channels and sliding the piece over the top pieces on both sides. Next I will insert 2 more side panels, but this time I use my seamer tool to barely flatten the sides I'm inserting into the posts, which makes it easier to get the panels in all the way. So I will insert the panel in the side post just below the top and then slide it up into the top and over all the way into the side. I ended up installing that last panel with the sticker on the inside, so I had to take the top pieces apart later on to pull the panel out and flip it around, so it's important to pay attention to which side is UV protected when inserting the side panels. Now to install the next middle truss assembly, I will first flatten the panel sides a little bit again and then slide the side posts over the panel starting at the bottom and working my way up. Then I will take the next side top piece and partially slide it over the wall so I can move the connector over and tighten it up to connect the 2 tops together. So taking a closer look at that on the other side, I slide the other top piece over the panel and work the bolts into the channel until the connector is halfway on each of the top pieces. Then I'll tighten the nuts up all the way to hold both of the top pieces together, and line the channel and slot up, then slide the nuts up all the way into the slot and tighten those bolts up as well. For the last 2 side panels, again I flatten the side edges down a bit and insert them into the side posts while making sure I have the stickers on the outside. Then after I have both of the panels inserted all the way, I'll flatten the other edge down a little and slide the corner post over them so I can screw everything together. Now here is where I start to have trouble getting the last corner post to line up with the floor, so I ended up loosening some of the nuts on the side pieces to try to pull the sides together more. Then when I think I have it, I'll slide the corner post on again and insert 2 screws to keep the side wall together. Next I'll start to assemble the wall with the doors, so first I need the top piece and 2 front posts along with the 2 shorter panels. So after figuring out which parts I need first, I'll insert the short panels into the corner posts with the stickers on the outside, and then slide the front posts over the panels. Then I insert 2 screws on each side into the bottom of the front post, which I end up having to take the top screws out to install the double U-shaped bracket, which should just be installed now. The front ends up sticking out past the floor, but I decided to install the top piece before trying to adjust everything so the front won't fall apart on me while I'm trying to figure out why the sides are too long. I end up having a problem trying to get the top left corner together though, so I have to take screws out to adjust things before everything will line up. But the bottom of the front wall is still sticking out, so I decided to take all the screws out of the brackets and flooring so I can move the floor sections back enough to where the front wall will sit on the platform. So starting at the back, I adjust the brackets and make sure the wall is all the way flush with the edge of the shed floor, and then I screw the brackets back in and tighten up the bolts once more. Then I will measure in between the top and the bottom of the posts, and here is where I realize that the floor sections don't line up how they should, so I have to overlap them a bit to maintain the same distance between the posts. And after I pull the floor back to where I have a consistent measurement, I'll screw the brackets back down and tighten them up again, and also insert the screws back into the overlap of the floor sections. Then I will do the same thing for the next section of floor, and I'll be able to check to make sure that the front is all the way on the platform with this one before I fasten everything back down and tighten up the bracket bolts again. And now that all the walls are square and they fit all the way around on the platform, I'll screw the first front bracket in, install one of the lug bolts that I had to buy, and then tighten up the nut holding the post to the bracket. Now here is where I have to take the top screw out to install the bracket, which I guess it's not a big deal that I didn't do it since I had to move the floor back. And I'll do the same thing for the other side, and here I'd like to point out that I used a drill bit that was smaller than the size of my lug bolts but larger than what the width would be without the threads. Then once again I have to take the top screw out to install the last bracket, and after I'm finished with this, I'll be ready to start assembling the shed roof. So to begin on that, I will lay out the pieces I need for the peak and sides of the roof and put the square head bolts inside the channels so I can connect them together. Now with two of the bolts on each end of the peak pieces, I will line the connector part up with the bolts and then slide it over them so I can put the nuts on and tighten them up. Then I will flip the peak piece over and do the same thing on the bottom of it after pushing two of the bolts that I will need later away from the middle connector. Now I will slide two bolts on each end of the roof side pieces and place a connector over them so I can put nuts on and tighten them up to connect them together. And I will do the same thing for the other side pieces of the roof, even though I won't need them until after I have most of the roof assembled. Next I will bolt on the front and back peak support pieces, which is just a single bolt in each corner. So I put a bolt inside the end of the peak support piece, then slide the bolt through the hole in the side wall piece, put a nut on and hand tighten it for now. And I just do the same thing for the other side. Now I'm ready to install the peak assembly, so I will position a ladder in the middle of the shed so I can climb up to put a clamp on so it won't fall off while I assemble the front and back of the roof. Next I will take a triangle shaped panel and insert it into the back of the roof with the sticker on the outside and then bolt the two metal pieces to the peak assembly. And I'll do the front almost the same way, but this time I bolt on one of the side pieces to the peak assembly first, and then slide the panel in before bolting on the other side and tightening up all the nuts. Now I'll grab the two spacer nuts and begin assembling the middle of the roof, so I start that by loosening up the trusses, so it's easier to install the spacer nuts after I get the two metal pieces bolted on above each truss. Then I will screw one of the spacer nuts onto a bolt I slid into the channel earlier when I connected the peak pieces together, and I'll raise the truss so I can try to bolt it to the peak assembly, but I realize here that I have the wrong bolt. So I will move on to the next truss, which we will take a closer look at. I will slide a square head bolt into the channel of the middle piece and bolt it to the topside wall assembly. Now I will attach the middle piece at the top on the peak assembly almost the same way, except I'll insert the bolt into the hole first and slide the head into the channel, then attach the nut and tighten both up all the way. And I'll attach the other middle piece above the truss in the same exact way. Then I will loosen up the nuts on both sides of the truss so I can lower it to attach the spacer nut, and I end up figuring out the correct bolt I need to attach the peak assembly to the truss. The bolt has a Phillips head, so I will screw the spacer nut onto the bolt inside the peak assembly channel, and then I can raise the truss back up to screw the correct bolt in using my Phillips head drill motor. Then I will go back and screw in the correct bolt on the other truss, and then tighten them all up so I can begin installing the roof panels, which is as easy as lining them up and sliding them in, and then putting a side assembly on and screwing it in along with the black corner pieces. The other side doesn't go as smooth as the first though. The front and middle panels were a little off, so I ended up having to readjust it on the inside to even them out. And after I had a more even spacing between the metal pieces, I had a hard time keeping the front and middle pieces inserted while I tried to put the side assembly on. I end up getting a screw in the side which will hold all the panels in place, and it becomes much easier to complete the rest of the installation from there. So taking a closer look, I'll put one of the black corner pieces on the back and screw it in, then move down to the hole in the side assembly and screw into the metal piece inserted inside of it. Then I'll slide the black corner piece on the front and screw that in as well to finish the other side. Next I'll install the black piece at the peak by inserting two screws, and I'll try to take one of the stickers off, but it has good adhesive, so I decide to try using a heat gun later. Here I'll try to install the rubber seal, but I can't figure out how to tuck it in, so I do some research later and figure out that I need to tear it apart to get it to fit right. Now I'll start trying to figure out the bracing on the inside, but then I realize I'm missing a bolt in the peak assembly, so I have to take off the black piece that I just put on a slide another one into the channel. Then I can slide both of the braces over the bolts and put nuts on, but here I realize that I used a shorter bolt at the bottom where they both connect, so I can barely get the nut on. It wasn't easy, but I end up swapping the short bolt out with the longer bolt off camera, and I had to basically take apart the whole peak to get the panel out so I could lift up the top piece on the rear wall enough to change them. The front braces get installed the same way as the rear, so I just slide each of them over the bolts, put nuts on, and tighten them up. Now it's time to install the doors, so I'll bring them over and stand them up inside the shed to make it easier to attach them. First I'll grab the left door and hold it up so the holes in the hinges line up with the pre-drilled holes in the vertical post, and then I'll insert screws to hold the door in place. I will also test out the locks to make sure everything lines up before inserting the last screws and moving on to the right door. Then I will do the same for the other side. I'll hold the door into place with the holes lined up and insert 3 screws into the hinge and post to hold the right door in place as well. And now that the doors are installed, I'll slide the bolts through the hinge on the outside and through the holes in the panel so I can tighten on a washer and nut on the inside of the door. Then I'll do the same thing for the bottom hinge on the other side, and for the top 2 hinges as well, using my drill motor with a Phillips head bit to screw the bolts into the washer and nuts. Now with the shed complete, I can use my heat gun to remove all the stickers on the outside of the panels. So I will heat them up a bit until they peel off easier, and then I can just dab the sticky side on any existing glue to remove it. I've had this shed for a couple of years now, and it has held up really well with no noticeable fading from sitting in the sun, but the locks really don't provide much security, so don't be surprised if it gets broken into quick and easily. Hopefully this video has helped, and feel free to ask any questions that you still may have in the comments. Thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe for more quick and on-point videos.